Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of the Emerald Planet and EmeraldPlanet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have a planet of 9 billion people by 2038 and possibly 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how are we going to be able to take care of all these people on planet Earth? And that's what Emerald Planet's all about. We come to you looking at the solutions, the best practices from around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet. Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet. We're making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And seeing the long-term impacts of climate change. We're glad to have you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us as we're looking at the country of China and looking at smog abatement, because smog has become really an issue on every Chinese person's mind, regardless of age, because it surrounds them day in and day out, no matter where they live in China, whether it's urban areas or rural areas. And so the gentleman sitting right beside me, this is Dr. Peng He, who is the president of the International Fund for China's Environment, IFCE, and he's been working on environment in China now for over 20 years, over 2 decades. That's really incredible. But he's really looking at this as far as how do we address the issue of smog, and out of that we can address many other issues as far as the environment to balance the air, water, and land quality in China. And I think that's really a very smart strategy to use, because you're using something everybody acknowledges is real, and then all the other things can fold more easily under that. So why did you select smog? Besides, it was obvious and everywhere.
Right. Smog was busted in 2013 in China, shocked the whole world. Not only China, people in China, so shocked the whole world. Suddenly, smog came from nowhere and all over China. So we had a small forum in DC and talk about this reason, what cause, analyze the cause, what was the problems. So that time, 2014, we found out it's a process of air pollution abatement technologies cause some of the issue, because sulfur dioxide is one of the key air pollution component pollutants. Once you did in this one, most use desulfurization process. You have to put a lot of water in there. So once the water gets in immediately to the air, then the moisture increase, so the smog busts out. So we found these problems, then we sent a policy recommendation to Chinese government, and but they didn't pay much attention at that time.
Now, looking at IFCE, you started, modestly. You've grown now to virtually everyone, even in a country as big as China, knows about IFCE and the work that you're doing. How over these years were you able to gain the trust of the central government, the provincial governments, and the local governments that really allows them to welcome you to come in, not just you go, they welcome you to come in and expand over China? What's been that process? And then we'll get into smog and how you've been addressing that.
I think first of all, most of our founders are originally from China. We have a natural connections, so we have cultural understanding with not much limited language barrier. And second one is we have been not only promoting technology exchanges, not only just focus on education and capacity building, but also provide policy advising to the central government. So that's very important. Also, use this platform in DC to promote activities, what happened in China. So we kind of help China to disseminate information to the worldwide. So that's why the Chinese government also welcome us to work in China.
Yeah, when we were talking about creating the EmeraldPlanet TV, and I went to your embassy, in Washington, D.C., And I said, we're really interested in the best practices. We're not talking about all the problems out there, but the best practices, solutions.
Right.
And we would like China to be part of that. Well, one, he was astonished that, I was saying there's best practices in China at that time. We're in our second decade now. But then he said, you have to go see Dr. He if you want to learn about this and do it. So the embassy, many of the agencies were really talking about and welcoming you as far as being this bridge, if you will, between the United States and China back to the United States. So looking at introducing these technologies, what did you do to start setting the stage or the platform for you to start bringing these technologies into China, which most people think about that market's very closed and it's very difficult to do, but in some ways they're very welcoming as far as new technologies. How did you set that stage?
We work with partners in China, Industrial Association, Renewable Energy Industrial Association. Those then we're also working with those non-profit and also industrial group in the U.S. So identify what's needed in China. So when they ask what's needed, what's the problems. So like 10 years ago, we brought largest U.S. solar delegation to China. That's 17 CEO from U.S. And we partner with the Solar Industrial Association for U.S. Then bring them back to China, to China. Also wind technology as well. And that's 10 to 11 years ago. So we identify the needs. That's beginning get started of China's renewable energies. So brought the best technology to there. So they develop a partnership. And later on, we also brought soil remediation technology group to China. They also welcomed. This field will bring more smart treatment technology to China. So I think we identify problems, then looking for technologies, find the best fit. So we do a kind of preliminary selections, searching. Then, so that's once you can solve the problems, everybody will welcome you.
Now, looking at these various seminars and the sharing of information across China, you are bringing international experts come in, but also you're using many Chinese have been educated abroad and now bringing them back into China. So how are the local Chinese that have always been there? They went, through, kindergarten to high school and university, many of them advanced degrees. But within China, how have they been, like this photograph we have here, how have they been welcoming these international experts, whether they're U.S., Western European, other Asian nations, or Chinese that live abroad? How have they been welcoming them back into China to help to solve some of these problems?
Yeah, we paid special attention to the Chinese expert in the U.S. because they don't have language barriers. So they have learned a lot of working in the factories experience. So we introduced them back to the factories, industries in China. So they first of all they understand the problem. It'll be easier. Also, they learn the advanced technologies, so they can link their the problems to the solutions. So a little bit easier. So for more than half of our delegation are formed for Chinese Americans. So I think that's also a little bit more effective in some way. That's why.
So they can sit together, talk together, and and they look alike.
Right.
And that really does help. But looking at the sage that I have the photograph here, this is yourself making one of your presentations. It's really been amazing the enthusiasm, because you've been at this almost 23 years now. And so to think of the countless thousands of hours. I've traveled with you several times. I don't think you ever sleep. You do eat ever so often.
I told the people a joke as I was working 12 hours for US, 12 hours for China. I don't have time to rest.
No time for yourself. But looking at being, this sage, going back to, the sages of old China, how do you think that your message has been accepted, the fact that you've been doing it so enthusiastically, and you've really, shouldn't say sold, but you've educated the Chinese that there must be a middle way. It's kind of like the Middle Kingdom concept. There must be a middle way between what the West is doing, what China has been doing, and where we want to go in the future. How has this sage been able to share that message?
Like 20 years ago, when Radio America interviewed me, they have a directly dialogue with people in China. They ask 10 people what's the importance of the environment. 8 people say, I don't care about it. Only 2 people say environmental concept is important. But nowadays, after 20 years of actions and pushing from inside and outside, probably more than 90 people knows about issues.
I was going to say, I've met hundreds of Chinese. I would say, 10 out of 10 are concerned about the environment.
Right.
There's no doubt about it.
Right. So that's the changes. We see the changes.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. We're going to quickly go through this. These are some documents that you were sharing with me the other day about the importance and how you were able to go through that process, get the proper stamps or proper authorities, which really kind of smooth your way into being able to go to all levels of government and all the people because you have the stamp from the central government.
Right. That's why we have maintained good relation with the central government. Like Minister for Science, and
I have that document up here. You're proud of that document.
Developing, reforming commissions. Some of the ministers are on advisory board. So some of are invited experts. So we working along with them and make sure they understand our intention and our advantages. So that's why government still will trust us. Even we criticize them openly and point out problems, but they say, well, that's something they needed.
Yeah. Now looking at this, and we want to go through these quickly, and I wanted to end up on these best practices, and we are about running out of time. But as far as having the hot spots around China, this is something where you start highlighting, and I'm just going to mention this because I know this, highlighting these issues, and the hotspots were virtually over the whole country. But then you started introducing the technology, say, look, we can remediate this and make China better. Let's just kind of go through this. Tell us what we're seeing here, and we'll just go through these slides, and then we'll end up with the final question.
Yeah, mainly the smog efforts has not been achieved as people expected. Smog still, very heavy in China. Is the side effects of the treatment technologies, like say desulfurization, denaturalization. Those first of all emitted too much of moisture, so water.
Right.
Then when you do nitrogen remove, we use a lot of ammonia. Ammonia, once it gets into air, you can catalyze the particular formation.
Right.
So you generate more PM 2.5. So you have you take one element down, then you have some other issue came out. So that's the side effects. So people have not paid attention to that yet. I think the government people say, so we have put this index so low, SO2 very low, NOx is very low, dust is best in the world, but the smog still came out. We now we want them to pay attention to the side effects, not only just got a beautiful index, but also the real effects in air, what's happening in
it's just like this one here is where you have the before and after, as far as, just simply just siphoning off the heat and using it as a byproduct in the production process, or even heating in the housing units is something that's very important. But syngas, why is this becoming so important both in rural and urban areas? And we got to go out on this one. We're about out of time.
I think can reduce the use of coal, because the coal is still mostly proton fossil fuel. If you use more gas, synchronized gas generated from coal, you can reduce overall pollutions. That's one of the strategies the Chinese government is trying to take.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Dr. Ha. Thank you for being with us as we look at China, removing smog and bringing the best practices from around the world as we create the Emerald Planet.